Okay, I think we'll get started. It's 5:30, and this is the meeting of the Mayor's Neighborhood Safety Task Force. Could we just go around and introduce ourselves and and state the organization that you represent? We'll start with Norma.
Okay. Norma Linton, representative of WUNA.
Okay.
I'm Esther Pat, representing the Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union.
I'm Kathy Wallig, representing SUNA, Southeast Urbana Neighborhood Association.
Giovanna Di Benedetto, representing the new Silverwood, Silverwater area.
Okay, and be sure to press the button, and it should be green when the microphone's on. Okay.
Marianne Downey with UNA, Neighborhood Association.
Historic East Urbana? Which one?
The historic East
Okay,
Urbana.
good, all right. Come on up, Dave.
Right here, sir. You get to introduce yourself too. That's okay. Kate's going to get your card up there. John Schneider, Community Development Director, City of Urbana.
Chuck Loss, Fire Chief.
Brian Serafin, Interim Police Chief.
Jim Simon, Urbana City Attorney.
Okay. And we have minutes from the August 22nd meeting. Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes? All right. Is there a
I'll move
motion?
approval.
Okay. Moved by Esther. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Kathy. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. Any additions to the agenda? The topics on the agenda, I'll point out, were ones suggested by the members of the task force, and they tend to change each month. Okay. Does anyone wish to address the task force? Seeing no one in the audience, we'll move on to presentations. One request we received was for a summary of fire department calls to the Southeast Urbana area, or citywide. Was it citywide? So Fire Chief Loss will present on that.
Okay. And I did put together a basic monthly report, which I've been wanting to get started on doing. So I did put together a very basic.
Is your microphone on?
Yeah, it is. Sorry
Okay.
about that. Just lean into it a little bit. Okay. It's a very basic monthly report that we have. We had a total of 555 calls in the month of November. Of those, Station 1 had 187 calls, 5 working fires that included structure fires, transportation vehicles, which was a semi-truck and trailer fire that we had, and then we had a rail yard fire that they participated in as well. 117 of those were fire and other calls. Some of those other calls included hazardous material calls, lifting assistance, carbon monoxide, fire detector calls, just a lot of other calls that we would have that we would be paged out on. So 117 were of that nature. 70 of those were EMS calls, which is pretty common. About 80% of our calls run in the EMS side of things. Station number 2, 186 calls as well. 121 of those were that, again, that fire and other call related, which dealt into those emergency calls. 65 were emergency medical calls. One of the things I did do is it's difficult for us to delve into the software as it is right now and find the overdoses that we've had in each monthly calls that we have. So what I did is we went back and we read through the narratives and tried to read each narrative of the 186 calls that we had to try to identify, at least in one area, some of the overdose calls. This was the area that we did identify. We had 4 overdose calls in Station 2's district that were identified by us as giving Narcan in those calls. Station 3, 77 total calls. 53 of those were fire and other related calls. 24 were EMS, or emergency medical calls. And then Station 4, which is our campus station, 105 total calls, and 67 fire calls, 38 emergency medical calls. Had a total estimated loss this last month of $225,000 an estimated save of a little over $500,000 of what the property that was saved after we had gotten in and extinguished fires. The significant fires that we did have was a storage unit fire that we had. We had 6 fully involved storage units that were on fire when the crews arrived on the scene. They got in, got it knocked down very, very quickly, but there was some smoke damage to several other units that were adjacent to those storage sheds, storage units. A single-family residential fire was in a computer study room, study area. Looked to be some overheated equipment that's still under investigation. But they got in. I was fully involved in the back of the structure when they got there. They got in, got it knocked down quick, used very little water to get it knocked down. But there was a lot of smoke damage, a lot of heat damage to that one. And the other significant fire that we had was a garage fire just last week. Fully involved garage fire when they rolled in on it. There was a little bit of delay hitting the fire because when we rolled in, the report was that a female resident was still in the structure. So our crews went in immediately, did a search of the structure to make sure that everybody was out, located the female resident in the backyard. She and her dogs got out of the structure. Nobody was injured, but it did do a significant amount of fire damage to the garage and a lot of smoke damage into the house. So that's kind of the wrap-up, a quick wrap-up of our monthly report for November.
Any questions? Kathy?
Thank you for that. I have some
bet.
questions about technicalities on reporting.
Mhm.
Okay, and perhaps our interim chief can pop in here. So the Urbana Police Department does media reports. They call them media reports. It's a really condensed digest.
Sure.
And they're posted about every 12 hours, sometimes 24 hours or so online. Is it difficult for the fire department to do the same thing?
We could probably put something very brief together. It just takes the staff hours to get that done. And to cut and paste a narrative is probably not going to work because some of the stuff that we do put into the narrative is not everything that we release out.
Right, and there's privacy issues, I understand that.
Right.
But, Brian, do you take information from UCR reporting to glean the information for the media reports?
So the, excuse me, the information for the media reports, that's an automated sort of thing that we have set up. It's humans are involved as far as approving it, but they don't have to cut and paste.
Right, right.
They don't, I mean, that's all data that's sort of harvested ahead of time, then we already know. Certain things we've anonymized to go to 100 blocks.
Sure.
And those particular things. And yes, all the incident codes would be like UCR data type codes that we use. With regards to the summary, the officers on each report will write or the front desk clerks will write a short sort of summary that's not necessarily cut and pasted from their full narrative. So those are essentially two different things. So that way, the clerks will prepare that release. The sergeant will give it the quick once-over to make sure that it's not something that we need to hold back for some investigatory reason or something, and then those are published. But again, it's a fairly automated system, and that's the same system that feeds crime mapping application, crimereports.com.
Crimereports.com.
So then it's put in another slightly different comma space variable computer thing, and it shoots out to crimereports.com, and that's what populates the map.
Okay. So, Chief, when you do your National Clearinghouse reporting, do you do that on a daily basis?
Monthly.
Okay. All right. As I told you in I think my email with the mayor, I was really concerned about the overdose issue. And you were able to glean 4 that you're aware of where the Narcan was administered. Just kind of anecdotally, do you think that's an average kind of call? Or
One of the things that we're looking at moving forward is we have our software company that is going to come in into January, and to try to put a little bit give us a little bit more of an ability to mine some data that we're looking for. Whether those are ad hoc reports that we make up to be able to mine the data that we want to see, but that's something that we don't have right now in the system. It's a Firehouse system, which was purchased by ESO, which is a tremendous reporting system, but it's going to take a little bit to get that to where we really want it to be.
Sure.
A little bit of tweaking here and there, put some drop downs to where it's easier to identify whether it is interventions or whether it is meds that we give. We'll be able to go in and get that information a little bit easier.
Okay.
Right now, like I said, we went through 186 reports to been able to get just the overdoses that Urbana Fire did in November. We'd had to go through 555 reports and look at each narrative on that. And some of those narratives, they attach an EMS report to it, so then we have to go back into another file, and it just is very, very time-consuming. But knowing that this is some of the things that are important, we're trying to adjust our report management system so that it can identify some really good information for us.
Okay. Well, I had been told by a former Station 2 resident that that station was now the busiest station in Urbana, and I was kind of surprised at the number. Having been involved in fire dispatch over the years, it was usually 1 and 3 that got most of the calls. But I don't know if that's addition of population or congestion, or I don't know. Do you have any idea what's led to that?
Yeah, I think some of the demographics of the different areas that we respond to, you know, the nursing homes that are in the area, the different facilities that we have in each area kind of will dictate the number of calls that we have. If there are places of assembly, stores, things like that, believe it or not, as far as EMS calls, there's not as many as what there are in residential areas. So Station 2 does respond to a lot of the residential, whether it's single family or multi-family residential. They do respond to a lot. And they were within 1 call of Station 1.
Station
So-
2 is the Philo Road station.
Yes, I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry, I
Yes.
should have clarified
Sorry about that.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, Station 2 is on Philo Road, Station 3 is on Lincoln, and of course, Station 1's here, and then Station 4 is on University.
Okay. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, no problem.
Mary Ann?
I wonder if you feel that you have adequate resources in regards to overdose antidote treatment and/or training for that kind of call?
One of the things we're continuing to hone our training. You know, we're continuing our EMS skills. We continually work on our EMS, again, because, you know, 70 to 80% of the calls that we go on are EMS calls. So we're really working on to make sure that those skills we stay on top of the game, as well as with the other things, the hazardous materials, the technical rescue, the fire suppression, you know, training with other departments, with the law enforcement, our neighbors. So as far as the training goes, yeah, we're continuing to stay on top of that. The Narcan is something that I think over time, because of the heroin that we see on the streets, we continue to look at making sure that we have plenty of Narcan on hand, and it hasn't slowed down. No, I mean, it's across the country. It really has not slowed down. It continues to be a concern.
I am reading and hearing much about this and across the country, and one of the things that surprised me about this, when you talk about heroin overdose, I usually think of a younger population and that sort of thing, but I'm also hearing that people like me have opioid issues and are also having overdose, unexpected or unintended overdoses as well. Are you seeing that kind of activity here?
And I'd have to look back on what the population that we respond to as far as across the board, but it doesn't, there is no line, socioeconomic line, no age line at all that is respected by that. We see it across the board, no matter, age, gender, race, socioeconomics. We see it across the board. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Any other questions for Chief Loss?
I guess, yeah, just out of my curiosity, if it's an EMS call, is a fire truck sent out or an ambulance?
Yes, to both. We're a tiered system here in Urbana, and a tiered system is that the fire stations are strategically located within the community. And they're located strategically so that they're in neighborhoods, they can respond quickly, and if by chance that the transport agency is out on another call, you have the fire apparatus, whether it's truck, engine, that responds to those calls. There are a lot of times we respond simultaneously, and because of the nature of the majority of the calls that we see, having those extra hands at the call is a tremendous amount of help, tremendous amount.
So ideally, though, would you just send an ambulance?
No. Ideally, to be able to have the resources on the scene, to be able to mitigate whatever that incident might be, that medical incident might be, is to have them there as quickly as possible. Cardiac arrest, just using that as an instance. Cardiac arrest, anything 4 to 6 minutes is a good possibility that there could be some cellular damage, brain damage. Anything over 6 minutes, the possibilities go up as far as possibility of some kind of brain damage, memory loss. 10 minutes or more, it's documented that it is pretty likely that there's going to be lasting brain damage. That's one in itself. You have any trauma event, again, you're looking at blood loss, tissue damage, drug overdoses. Again, the things that we want people as on the scene as quick as we can.
I guess my question is, what does a fire truck have to do with EMS, though?
Good question.
Doesn't have the stuff you need for the medical service.
It doesn't have transport capabilities, but what our fire apparatus do have is EMT intermediates, and an intermediate can administer cardiac drugs, an intermediate can shock, and an intermediate can do a lot of things that can be interventions.
You mean a person?
A person, yes.
Okay.
Yes, a firefighter intermediate. There are different levels of EMTs. The first level is emergency medical responder. That's about a 16-hour course. Then the next level is a basic, EMT basic, which is a total semester class. You have to go through internship. Intermediate's the next level, and then paramedic is the level after that. When you get into those levels, the internship, the ride time, the time that you have to spend in clinicals is anywhere from 500 to 600 hours into a paramedic, which is over 1,000 hours of clinicals. So what they can do, the interventions that they can do when they get on scene, the EMT intermediates can make the difference of life and death, or that savable person once they get to the hospital. We call it a chain of survival, and when the chain's intact, when every link of the chain is strong, then there's a good chance at the end that person can walk out of the hospital. intact.
Well, yeah. I guess I understand that, and I don't mean to belabor the point, but it sounds like it's less of a fire department than an EMT service.
It is full service. It's full emergency services. What we offer to the city of Urbana, Class 1 fire department, what we offer to the city of Urbana is EMT services, hazardous material services, technical rescue services, fire suppression, fire prevention, public education, inspections. The guys go around when the weather is permitted, the guys go door to door on Saturdays, knock on everybody's door in the community, and check your smoke detectors to make sure your detectors are intact. If they aren't, they'll replace a battery, or if it's older than 10 years, we replace the smoke detectors for you. So the department that you have serving you, I'm very happy, very honored to say, top-notch department.
And with Class 1, it also can have an impact on your home insurance
Yes.
rates. So now that we're a Class 1 ISO community, you should check with your insurance providers. Save a few bucks. We have time for one more question on fire, and then we'll move on.
I just wanted to answer John's question. The fire truck is the taxi for the rest of the personnel. That is at least the way former
Yeah.
fire chiefs have explained to me. And the idea is for an EMT response, it's best to take more personnel than who fit in the ambulance. And they need to take the fire truck with them, because then if they get called to a fire, they have the truck with them right there. And when they go do the smoke detector things, same thing, they take the fire truck with them, so that if they get called to a fire, they've already got the truck. And my question, I tend to ask this question, do you folks check apartments, or is it just single-family homes that get the smoke detector checking?
If we get a phone call, we'll go anywhere.
But the standard, the
yeah.
routine that's been going on for my whole life is just the single-family homes, right?
Right.
I would like to suggest, Mayor, that if anyone needs more special attention in terms of free smoke detectors as well as checking batteries, it's tenants, not homeowners, and the city has, for some 30 years, been doing this program just for homeowners. I really think it'd be better if it were directed at rental properties.
So noted. Okay, thank you very much, Chief. Discussion topics that were requested, we wanted to provide an update on the 1306 East Silver project. That's the corner of Silver and Water. And John Schneider will provide that, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions to follow.
I just want to talk briefly about the point about apartment inspections. The fire department, our staff goes around and we do a systematic cycle. We get to the end of the cycle and we start over again. The first time through took a little bit longer than what we thought, but we're starting our second path through. What the fire department does, the engine companies go around to the multifamilies and do commons areas inspections. And typically, if they notify us that there's an issue with the commons area, our staff follows up on those common area inspections. And if it rises to a certain level, then we'll just say we're just going to do a systematic inspection of all the units. But our staff ensures that every rental unit that they inspect have smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors in accordance with our code, which is more stringent than the state code. For the single-family homes, the fire department provides probably a single-station smoke detector. So just to clarify that. For 1306 Silver, one of the things that we were able to do this year because of our new software program with CitizenServe and a couple other components, the rental registration ordinance indicates that no owner shall be allowed to register if they have any fines or fees outstanding with the city. So we went ahead, it was about 45 days ahead of the rental registration process. We notified anybody that had a rental property in Urbana, that if they had outstanding fines or fees, they would have to satisfy those before they would be allowed to register. So that started the process. And when it became evident to us that, the property owner at 1306 Silver didn't respond, so we notified the tenants. At the same time, we notified the tenant union so that they were aware that they might be getting calls, and asked them to refer people back to us. So we have a really good working relationship with the tenant union in that regard. So what happened was the owner did come on the last day and paid the fines and fees. And then we established in a form of agreement with them that we would inspect the property, all the occupied units first, and they would have a specific amount of time as allowed in the code to rectify any code violations. And if those weren't rectified within the timeline, we would basically deoccupy the building and indicate that the building is not approved for occupancy. We have, now we have 3 units that are now occupied. The rest of them have been indicated with a red ball that says not approved for occupancy. And they've been notified as to the timeline for repairing the code violations in the common areas. And then we have inspections scheduled for 2 of the units, and to date, one of the units has not responded to our attempts to contact. So one of our housing inspectors goes out there on a regular basis, has gotten to know the tenants. If they respond, one of the challenges is people don't come to the door. You know, we post things on the door, we send them in the email or in letters. If we have email, we notify them that way. If we have phone contact, we notify them that way. But as it stands, so 1306 has 3 units occupied and the rest are not approved for occupancy.
Is that 12 units?
Yeah, there's a total of 12 units, so 9 have been not approved for occupancy. And they won't be approved for occupancy until they're fully code compliant. And this is a process we've employed with a lot of other multifamily dwellings in Urbana, is typically if we start doing that, we allow the property owner, we just don't let anybody live in the unit. As long as the commons areas are approved, you know, code compliant, and the other units are code compliant, and then that allows the property owner time to repair unit by unit, and we don't let anybody move back in there until they're fully code compliant.
Questions? Kathy?
I guess I am frustrated with our codes. I don't know if it's our codes, I don't know if it's our personnel, I don't know where the problem is. That 1306 has been, for anybody who has kept an eye on it, has been on the decline for many years. I guess my first question is, one, when was the last time anybody was in or around that building? And secondly, what can we do to change the rate of response for issues in a building like this so that they don't get as bad as they are now? I think that the time is the frustration level. What do we need to change?
Well, I don't know if I can answer that. I do know that one of the things that we changed a few years ago was we instituted a ticketing process where a failure to comply ticket, we followed that process with this property. To answer your question, last time somebody was in that property, Nick Hansen was there yesterday, and I think you were there and saw him there, and he did Nick Hansen has gone, one of our housing inspectors, has been a regular on that property.
Okay.
And we also have Jason Aerosmith from Nuisance that has been there cleaning up nuisances and things like that. So we're regularly there, and with respect to the code and the law, I mean, I'd have to defer to our city attorney if you have any specific questions on that. Because what we do is we follow what the code says, we write tickets, then we follow that up with inspections. If a property does not reach the threshold where we can condemn the property, I know that was one of your questions in an email, it has to reach a certain threshold, and I know a lot of people have opinions about what that threshold should be, but we're constrained by minimum code standards, and if people meet the minimum code standards, you know, that's the most that we can require them to do in accordance with our code. Anything beyond that will be a different issue, and that's when we turn it over to legal. We always follow our legal staff's advice on how to proceed and increase how we can get them towards compliance.
I think I would add the one thing that has changed is we're actually enforcing our own ordinance with regard to payment of fees before a person can register their property. So that's why the substantial fine was paid, and it was a difficult time for the tenants, because if she had not paid her fine at the last minute, or she should have paid before, but if she hadn't paid her fine, we would not have renewed rental registration on that property. We had to notify the tenants a month in advance that this was a possibility, and this is never easy. It's never easy when you have this situation, and it's and it's squarely on the landlord's shoulders that this got to this point. But that's what's different, is we're actually enforcing our ordinance. So, and Carol and John and his team and our legal department deserve kudos for that.
If I could just add one other element, which is it's not just enforcing on a given property, it's enforcing on an entire portfolio, which
Yes.
gave us additional leverage in this case. So I don't see us coming up against someone with years of accumulated fines and occupied properties in the future, because we do have this leverage and we're willing to use it.
And that's different. So,
I hate to see us spending so much time and money and resources on, how many landlords do we have in the city of Urbana? And we have two that are remarkably notorious for just the conditions of their properties and their treatment of their tenants. I don't know, I just want it to stop.
we're with you there. Teresa?
I just have two questions. One is about the minimum. So this is a 12-unit apartment. How many of those units have to be uninhabitable for the apartment itself to be condemned? Or,
Well-
like, nobody can live there?
That doesn't play into it.
There's
The
no-
quantity, it can have one unit, as long as it's code compliant and the commons areas are code compliant, then somebody can live there. So that, that's under the control of the property owner, and to a degree, we've maintained control of non-compliant units by putting the red ball on there and saying it's not approved for occupancy, and not allowing them to be reoccupied until they become code compliant.
So is that like an Uber code in the US of A, or?
It's the International Property Maintenance Code as adopted by the city of
Okay,
Urbana.
so no city could initiate a code that says if 50% of your units are not habitable, you can't rent this apartment?
I can't answer that. I could defer to our legal
Well,
staff,
yeah, I
but they
would
probably
be-
couldn't answer it either at this point without a lot of research. Jim coming up?
Jim could, I guess he could.
You raise an interesting question, but the problem is, under the Constitution, we cannot take property without just compensation or due process. So to shut down an entire building because 50% of the units are unoccupiable and have been redballed, while the other half are occupiable, is a taking of property. And if we do that, we run the risk of a constitutional violation and all. That's why the code is structured the way it is. So as John indicated, if one unit in a 30-unit building is compliant, and the common elements and the areas that provide the systems, boiler, water, et cetera, for the building are compliant with the code, then that one unit can remain open and the others are shut down and are put back online as they become totally code compliant. But if the common areas or the systems that support life in that building, heat, water, if the building has central air, which probably it doesn't, then that's something different, because then the whole building is now not compliant. And then we can shut the building down and all. But obviously, the process of shutting a building down, whether it's half the units or all the units, as our mayor has indicated, is a very difficult process, and a very difficult process on the tenants. And as you know, with this one building we're dealing with, we are involved in tenant relocation and assisting them financially with their relocation and all. But it's a time-consuming process, because every tenant has their own needs and their own time frame and their own circumstances and their ability to go elsewhere. So we have to deal with it on a tenant-by-tenant basis, a unit-by-unit basis, and maybe a building basis.
So, I mean, I know the answer to this question, but I'm just going to say it rhetorically. So if there is, that building has, you can see 6 outside air conditioners. One is empty, the place where an air conditioner should be, sort of, Another one has a blanket over it. I mean, I go by there all the time. I live in that area. I'm just saying, it's clear nothing can be done because she has the ability to rent out 2 apartments that people can live in, I guess.
Yes.
Does make you wonder what is the condition of those apartments given the condition of the rest of the building. And she's sort of pulled out of the business to the extent that she's removed the dumpster from the back of the building. So there's no place, every time I go by there, there's trash in the corner of the parking lot, because where are people going to put their trash?
And Jason goes out there.
Right, and she gets
so
cited, and she
incurred-
gets
yeah,
8
exactly.
days, and she gets cited, and she gets 8 days. I mean, I know how the process worked. It worked like that, for Zaruki for years. So, yeah.
Let
that's-
me address, you bring up kind of tangentially, and I think Ms. Wallach brought up a question, or somebody brought up a question about why does it take so long to address some of these properties? We can't do anything until we are put on notice as a city that there's a problem with a property. If it's a problem with the common area of the property, our inspectors have the right to go in. If it's a problem with a unit or a group of units, the tenant has to let us in and has to be there to let us in. The tenant cannot say, well, my friend over here will let you in. Then we get into basically Fourth Amendment search and seizure issues. And we just can't go in because somebody else lets us in, unless that friend happens to have a written attorney-in-fact agreement that gives the authority a power of attorney, that gives the friend or relative the authority to act in connection with, let's say, building problems. So we go there, and if a tenant is there and is willing to let us in, we can get in. If the tenant, for whatever reason, is unwilling or not there, then the only option is to go back and continue to try, which we do. And still, if we have no traction there, the only way we can get in is to obtain a search warrant. We have to go to court to obtain it, and we've done that. We've done that many times since I've been here. I've been here a little over 6 years now, and we have done that. The problem with that process is we just can't go to court based on a friend's hearsay of what somebody else told him or her. Somebody with direct, firsthand knowledge has to go with us, as well as one of our inspectors or John, to testify that they have firsthand knowledge and that it is not only not code compliant, but that it creates a life safety problem. A torn screen is not going to get us a warrant. A lack of water, heat, light, some other fire hazard, that's going to get us in. But we need either the tenant to let us in or somebody with firsthand personal knowledge of the condition, and then, of course, our inspector or John, who can advise the court as the seriousness. And as I say, we have done that.
To get the ball rolling, oftentimes what we need is a complaint from a tenant, and it's unbelievably difficult sometimes to get a tenant to file a complaint with the city.
Yeah, they're put under...
Dealt with a case today, which was unbelievable.
Yeah, they're put under duress. There are landlords, as we all know, in the city who say, if you complain to the city, I will evict you.
Which is against the law, but
Which is against the
people
law, but they do it
still-
anyway.
I mean, it is against the law to do that, but if you're behind on the rent, it's not against the law for the landlord to evict you for non-payment of rent, which is the
No,
number one
but not
reason-
for making a complaint.
No, but if you
about the
make a complaint to
condition.
the housing inspector and their motive is retaliation, which is, the retaliation's unlawful, but the practical matter is, if you're a tenant, you need to be current on your rent if you don't want to take a chance getting the inspector. And also, there's a whole, well, maybe John can address this better, but on the month-to-month tenancy, if a landlord A landlord has the right to give you a month's notice whenever they want to move out. If they just happen to give you that month's notice to move out after you get the city inspector out, are you going to be able to argue retaliatory eviction, or is the court going to say, well, they had the right to terminate you on the month's notice anyway? Though, I mean, I have problems getting people to file complaints when there's no reason they should be afraid, but those are the two reasons that I know that people don't file complaints, is because they don't want to get evicted because they're behind on rent, or they're not at all in the wrong, but they just don't, they're on a month-to-month lease. And Housing Authority of Champaign County, for whatever reason I don't know, has decided that nobody gets a year's lease anymore. If you are a tenant with a voucher, you get a year's lease for your first year, and after that, Housing Authority just has to go month to month, which is lovely for the person who wants to move, but it stinks for the people. Well, and then that's the problem, is when I get voucher holders, they should call the city inspector to get the work done, but if they're on a month to month, the landlord might just kick them out, and that's like 10 times harder for them to move on a 30-day notice, because Housing Authority won't approve a new place in 30 days, and so it just puts the tenants at jeopardy for getting sued and evicted by the landlord for holding over. I mean, it's a really tough situation for tenants, and they need more support from, well, definitely, I wish you'd do something with Housing Authority, but it would be the city's systematic inspection. That is an advantage of it, is that the city has a reason to go in without having to rely on tenant complaints. That's what makes Urbana better than a lot of other places. But I guess you're talking about, like, if a homeowner calls and says, "Oh, go," that you can't go in on that, and you couldn't get a search warrant based on Teresa Michelson or Esther Pat says there's something wrong with it. You got to have someone who's in the building saying, "I saw X," right?
For a warrant, absolutely. But if a neighbor believes there is a problem, they can bring a complaint, and we will go out and look at the common areas. We may knock on a door, but if we are not allowed in, now we got to go the search warrant route. The other problem that is how the tenants approach this. If they have a problem with their unit, their first thought or recourse is, well, they may not literally go through this mental process, but I'm going to make it financially problematic for the landlord. I'm going to stop paying my rent. Why should I pay for rent with these kinds of conditions? These are awful conditions. Now the landlord, as Ms. Pat indicated, has the right to evict for non-payment. So the instruction needs to be to tenants, continue to pay your rent. If you are constructively evicted, meaning the landlord creates a condition which is untenable, heat, light, water, those kinds of things, serious fire threats, they should be able to get their rent back. Now, the process is sometimes, whether it's responding to an eviction or initiating an action in court, most tenants on their own certainly not equipped to do that, and so they have to go to a legal aid. And I'll be honest, I'm not familiar with how extensive legal aid is down here. I know up north where I'm from, there are a number of legal aid societies that help.
But John can talk about that. That's what he does.
Ah, there you go.
We certainly exist, and people are certainly welcome to come to us.
Good. Excellent.
If a tenant wants to sue their landlord, you can't help them. You only help them when they're being sued, right?
Mostly.
Yeah.
I mean, occasionally. It's rare for a tenant to come strictly wanting to sue the landlord. It's usually when they come to us about an eviction. But we could.
Or it could come up where the landlord seeks to evict and the tenant says, "I want my money back." This is constructive eviction. You may have a right to evict me, but you have forced me out already because of the conditions. And if you all are available to raise that argument, obviously, at least if the facts are present, I'm sure you all would raise that argument.
Well, we want to be mindful of the time. Giovanna, any more questions on 1306? Or
Yeah,
silver water?
Yeah, 1306, I'll just address while we're here. So one thing, first of all, some of the issues that you guys are talking about as far as what the tenants need to understand, if you look at that area and those specific apartments, most of what you're dealing with are residents who are talking about a low education, we're talking about mental health problems. They don't understand their rights, and you're not going to get them. That's just a slow process. 1306, I have personal experience. That was my first apartment when I moved into the area. I was the first one to start making phone calls, so Kara does not like me very much. But so that building's been a problem for 2 years. I've been here for about 2.5 years now. And honestly, that's a building that, as a resident there and as a leader in that community, I get 2 complaints: Paul's buildings and her building. Her building, that's their major issue right now. Everyone is, the 3 residents you're talking about, one is a lifelong heroin addict in the area who now Paul has rented to. So we still, we're moving people around. And, the money that she just paid off, and I agree, what can we do? That money, she could have had that building fixed.
Sure.
And so it's, what I'm being asked and what I was asked to find out tonight is, I think 2 out of those 3 residents have now moved out as of this week. I know one moved into our building, and Becky moved. But the one that's left, he doesn't pay rent anyway, so there's issues there. So I've been asked to find out a timeline and then what can be done. That property is just going to sit and be an eyesore. I know my group has some ideas for that down the road, but residents are asking, we don't like this, which is really funny considering some of the things. But I know from personal experience, guys, I had to move because I would be eating my dinner and the bugs would crawl into my food while I was eating. That's what you're living with over there. I had to move because my kids almost got taken away from me because of the condition of the apartment. And so, between my knowledge and other people's, with one person, as far as we know, left in the building or close to it, what are we looking at as far as finally being able to do something with that particular building and area of land?
Want to take that?
Well, I can try to answer it. It's owned by somebody, and, there'd be a legal process we would have to go through, so I can't really provide any idea on what we can do going forward other than what we can do, the city can do. And I articulated that earlier, that we're going through a process. We are scheduled to inspect 2 of the units on December 11th, and the commons area has been inspected. They have a certain timeline. If the timeline isn't met, then the property will be entirely posted as not approved for occupancy, and it will be deoccupied. And we'll work with the tenants to find them a different place to live.
And hopefully, at some point, the landlord will either decide to invest some money if she wishes to generate money from her building, or she'll sell it. But if she just holds on to it and it deteriorates to a point where it is not just an eyesore, but it is a true hazard of falling down or whatever, then we could try to enforce demolition. But that's a court proceeding, and what we would have to prove is that the value of the building is less than what it would cost, or the cost of demolition is less than what it would cost to repair the building. But it requires experts and that kind of thing, so it's a process. Again, it all goes back to what I started out with, that property owners have very strong rights in their property, and when governments get involved with those property rights, you get, depending on what it is, you get into constitutional issues. And defending constitutional issues can be very expensive for a municipality.
Okay, yeah, well, I'll relay all of that, so thank you, and I'll be in touch with the other information that I have, because we do have someone that, there might be a solution over there, so with the group that I represent, aside from the neighborhood, so thank you.
Any other questions? Chief Serafin had an update on criminal activity.
Okay, so we'll start with the most serious things, which is, of course, the ongoing shooting violence that we've had in Champaign, Urbana, and the surrounding edges of town. I will tell you that currently we sit at just roughly over 100 shooting incidents in Champaign, Urbana since January 1st. These are rough numbers. Approximately 70 of those were in Champaign, 30 in Urbana, and a handful in the county sheriff's jurisdiction around the edges of towns. The University of Illinois has 0, so we do have that going for us here on campus. So I just wanted to mention that. The other thing that has, Melissa Haynes had done a little bit of workup for us with regards to the ever-present, always occurring burglaries to motor vehicles, and had done some heat map work for us covering October and November. And not necessarily a spike, but we'd seen a consistent amount of activity in 2 different areas. One more in what I would call the campus area, sort of south of University, between Lincoln, stretching over to Vine, and then probably Carl Park north. So that particular area was one, and the other one was far east, sort of south of Washington as you get beyond Philo Road and head out east of town. So those 2 areas seem to have been a problem. We continue to put officers in there. We continue to always tell people lock their cars. You guys have probably heard this for years on this committee, that the number of iPads that are stolen off the front seat of a car because nobody bothered to lock the door or take it inside or at least tuck it under the front seat. Try a little bit. Otherwise, it can be very difficult. The third thing I wanted to bring up is that we are continuing to monitor, and this was a topic I think at last meeting, Town and Country. We haven't necessarily seen a fall off, but we have been monitoring those. I know there has been some discussion. Michelle Brooks within the City Legals Division has been very helpful with us in trying to set up meetings and put them on notice and whatnot. So we are moving forward with that. Now, I will say that to kind of bring this back around full circle, as you may recall, after one of I think it was the October meeting of the Community Coalition, that occurred where some of the most wanted gentlemen, I think there were 6 names that were released. One of those was found up in the northern area of Illinois, but his permanent residence was Town and Country. So we were able to get him scooped up, and so that's a good thing. But in Town and Country, it hasn't ignored us. I don't want to ever paint that picture. They've worked with us, but we aren't quite getting the results yet that we want. And as everyone has said numerous times, these processes are just slow. So having said that, do you guys have some questions that I can try and answer tonight?
You might not have this at your fingertips. We've had 100 shootings. How many murders?
0 in Urbana, and I couldn't speak for the exact numbers in Champaign. More than 1, less than 10.
I have a friend in Champaign whose son was murdered in August. They still have not arrested the person who did it. There were other kids that was right outside her home, and witnesses and such. And I wonder if something like that, because of the neighborhood or something, it's not going to get brushed under the rug, and there's still active work being done to try to get people to come forward and find who did that and bring them to justice.
So I spent 16 years in our detective bureau here, and I've met a lot of the detectives in Champaign, and I can assure you that is something that they're continuing to work on. They have one of the issues that we always struggle with in these situations is to find and glean information from people who maybe haven't always had the best relationship with the police or are distrustful of the police. And so that's, we continue to have community engagement. That's, I think, one of the positive and upsides of the Community Coalition, is that when that group gets together and meet once a month, and we were just talking earlier tonight about that meeting, the last one I was at, it was 80 to 100 people. And when we get a chance to sit and get a chance to ask questions, or they break up into small groups, and we have some of these discussions that hopefully that helps to break down some of those barriers. I'm not going to say that it works all the time, that it's a perfect system, but clearly we need that community involvement. And sometimes things happen where somebody finds themselves caught up in maybe some trouble. And so there's exchanging of information, and there's a variety of things. But I can assure you that it's the Champaign Police Department has not swept that under any rug.
I was going to bring this up as part of my report on WUNA, but the neighbors in my immediate neighborhood are wondering, with regard to the armed robbery on High, High and Cedar, if there's any further information, if there were subsequent, I know there was a second one, but if there are subsequent incidences, or you have been able to apprehend the suspects, et cetera. I mean, we're pretty shocked that our peaceful little neighborhood.
And Mayor, you might correct me, this would have been one of the ones a couple of weeks ago where we had some okay. So there were two that occurred in fairly short order.
Yeah.
During the course of an evening.
Yeah.
And with regards to the descriptions were very similar, and during the second one, there was a local officer, I don't remember what department it was, I don't believe it was Urbana right away, that was ultimately able to spot the car speeding away, and they did ultimately catch up to the car over in northeast Urbana, where the car was parked unattended, all the doors were open, and there was no one there. A neighbor nearby had heard something and had called the police and said, hey, somebody's running through my backyard, so that kind of guides the officers, and ultimately they find some guy coming out of the briars and the brambles with stuff all in his pants, and I'm just out waiting, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, just out waiting for my friend to give me a ride. Ultimately, as the officers investigate, they did make that there was an arrest made in that incident with that young man who was from the Danville area, and I don't know, the investigation was ongoing, and I don't know whether they were able to sort of parlay that young man's statement into further, but that was one that was it was fortunate, and we were very glad that the officers had been able to work that, which I guess leads me to, I guess, one other one, that a good feel-good story for this particular group is that we had up at on North Lincoln, and I believe it was Capstone Quarters. They'd had a robbery on there. One robber, one victim in a cell phone app selling thing meetup where I'll sell you my thing and just meet me in the parking lot. And of course that turned in, unfortunately, into a robbery. Later that night, two guys, same complex, rob one pizza man, and then three guys rob another cell phone app sales thing. The good thing is the last guy actually watched where the robbers took off to, phoned the police, and was able to provide very specific information about where they were able to go. The policemen were able to knock on the door, able to make a cursory entry with consent of the person who answered the door, gather enough information to secure the residence, obtain a search warrant, and then find evidence of all three robberies in there to make several arrests. So again, we can, due to the severity of all this, we're not necessarily checking for air conditioning units, but these guys were able to do a lot of good work that night and make ultimately 3 arrests.
So the Brambles guy did
Yes.
not cough up any information about the actual
I don't know all the
robbers.
details, and I'm not sure I'd be able to release that tonight anyway.
Oh, okay.
So.
Well then. Hot news.
But there are.
Again, and that just speaks, and that, the thing I like about that story is it speaks to this neighbor who saw something, heard something at 2 o'clock in the morning. And those are the kinds of things that we need people to do. The officers found the car, but they wouldn't necessarily have waited around or known to go to that end of the block, but citizens called.
And that's when the
And,
police
yeah.
say we need the community to help us. It's the victims need to help them solve these crimes, and people like the woman who called in the guy in the backyard. That's what makes the difference.
And that's a part of that whole, community policing. How about that? That's a good term. We'll use that, But that's one of the things that I think is just so valuable. So yes, we encourage everybody to keep calling us on those kinds of things.
Well, I wanted to make sure we had time for reports from the neighborhood groups, if there's any information that you wanted to share. Shall we start down with Megan? Anything from North Urbana?
All good on my end of town.
Okay.
I mean, it's beautiful. Ever since Habitat came in, and with a lot of those properties that were so ugly, for so long are gone, the whole neighborhood is quieter, the families, people are out more. The only issue we have is occasionally, still people flying downhill in Fairview, going on to Washington to avoid University. And sometimes folks, particularly during rush hour, particularly Friday and Saturday nights, they're really moving, but the park's quiet, school is quiet. It's good.
Thank you. Teresa?
Well, we've talked about one of the large problems, the two big elephants in the room. But I was going to say, Salt and Light, that's been a really nice addition to the neighborhood for sure. There's a lot of foot traffic over there and just a lot of, people out and about. So that's good.
And I believe they're going to have a community open house on December 12th. I just saw the notice about that. So people who haven't been there, it's a chance to get a tour of the whole operation. Nothing?
I am the neighborhood watch coordinator for the Country Squire Edition neighborhood. We mostly communicate through emails, and I explode those to people in the watch group. We had a report of some people thought some shots were fired, and so we got some communication going both on email and on the Nextdoor app, and ended up finding someone that had witnessed some fireworks being shot off. So we found out the answer to that one and I think the police were called on it, but and that was mentioned in the emails going around, but we were trying to find out what was going on. And also, one report came through my directive to let us know about a car burglary. So since we met last, that's really the only activity we've had.
Giovanna?
I think we've continued to see things fairly quiet over in Silverwood. So I think this summer was a great success with, I think we estimated, we've been doing over the last year a project every other month. So I would like to share that my group is slowing down because it's, 3 main people and we're killing ourselves. But we will still, we're still going to be very active, but this block party thing is just so huge now that we actually now need to start planning it farther and farther ahead. But it's making a difference, and so we're really encouraged by that. Feedback in the community overall has still continued to be really really good. People are happy. They're seeing things change. Aside from the other elephants, there are 2 main concerns. One is, I don't know the exact address of the building, but there's a building, I live at 2014, and there's that fence in our parking lot, and then there's, I don't know who owns the building, but it's Champaign County Realty manages it. That continues to be a huge crime spot. That continues to be where we see the most police. That tends to be, I know for a fact, some of the heavier drug issues over there. So that still continues to be a concern.
The corner of Silver and Philo?
Yeah,
Is that the
Silver
one?
and Philo, it's across the street from Paul's building. So I have repeatedly tried to contact Champaign County Realty. I've cornered them at the Windmans Expo and gotten blown, no, you need to talk to this person. So they, I don't know who the owner is, but
We do.
yeah, something needs to be done, and it is in particular on the second floor. If you sit over, you can come to my apartment anytime and just sit and look. So that does continue to be a concern of a lot of people in the area. So, and then obviously Paul's property is, I'm still getting a lot of complaints, but people are afraid to call, like we spoke about. So I wanted to let you guys know, I'm on it, but people, if they let you in, word travels, and then even if they don't get retaliated from Paul, they get retaliation from other people. I heard of a mentally ill gentleman that he's renting to that has no stove, no microwave.
Is this
the kid,
Fletcher? The Fletcher Street?
This one is, this particular gentleman is in Philo Building. Philo Building is worse than Fletcher right now as far as the condition, is my understanding. But I haven't been in, well, actually, I was in Fletcher when I was canvassing. Philo, it's a little bit more difficult to get in because it's off and on whether or not it's locked. But in my opinion, they both have their major issues. So I think Philo just is very run down. Fletcher is where your drug addicts, drunks, his maintenance guys, that he pays them in product and free rent. So although people don't like it, they're afraid. And so consequently, they keep coming to me. I'm going to keep bringing it to you. There's got to be some sort of a solution. We have to put our heads together for these people, So, and now, we have had a problem that he turned around and, rented to somebody that when I lived there, he wanted to rent to her. And I said, you do, and I'm gone. I will break my lease. Because that's how bad this person is. And he did not rent to her. And now, there already is prostitution activity in his Silver Street building. And I believe it's on the first floor, is my understanding. So those are kind of the main areas we're dealing with. And then I know in the newsletter that went out, there was a section there that talked about the energy companies that are coming out. We're having a really difficult time with that in our neighborhood. If there's any way that maybe we could print up something to hand out to the residents over there, because most of them don't get the newsletter, don't have internet. And I caught a guy yesterday. Unfortunately, I was running out the door to catch a bus, but I warned him, someone's going to call the police. Oh, they're not going to. And he continued to go through the rest of our apartments, which were vacant anyways. But, we've got elderly people over there that have been taking advantage. So if there's some other way that we can get word out to them, instead of the newsletter, I think that would help a lot. So,
Talk to Scott Tibbs.
other than that,
Okay.
I think they're starting to improve. We're really happy with Orlando. H&L Property is, they fixed up the whole one building and are now in the process of renting that out. So, I rent from them now, and I've been very thrilled with them. So, some improvements.
Esther, anything? Okay. Norma?
Most of the things I think that people are talking about on the WUNA network should be brought to the city council, so I won't go into those. But I noticed, for several years now, that Illinois Street is kind of like Indy 500. There's incredibly speedy traffic going back and forth ever since that stoplight was put in, actually. But a couple of people mentioned that they would like to have the light at Illinois and Lincoln, the green light for traffic going west, to last longer because they can barely get in a left turn if there are more than two cars. And there's no arrow, so you have to wait for the oncoming traffic from Illinois
Well,
to
that's
stop.
an issue you could bring to the Traffic Commission, which meets every month. Is it the second Tuesday of the month? I was looking at the person who goes to it every day. First Tuesday of the month. 4 o'clock, first Tuesday of the month, but that would be an issue that the Traffic Commission would have to, could look
And the
at.
speeding?
Same thing.
Okey-dokey.
I have complaints about Iowa Street, too. I just want to say.
Oh, speeding, okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to get everybody home so you can have supper. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, staff, for your reports, and we'll follow up on the issues that were raised. So the next meeting will be, these are quarterly, so December, January, February, March, I think, and we'll send the date out. Wish everyone a happy holiday. Stay warm.